Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'm your host, Joe Abadi. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. In the Moto Showcase, we'll be taking a look at a 1975 KX400. We'll be going over your questions in the Here's the Problem segment. We're also going to be taking a look at a 1973 CZ250 that recently sold on eBay, and we're going to talk about what it's worth. But right now, let's get to the starting line. In this past week, I completed two 1974 Honda CR 125 and 250s. I posted them on Facebook for them to see. We had a little technical difficulty. I posted them on Facebook for everyone to see, the 74 CR 125 and 250. It's always a great feeling when people make wonderful comments on the work that I've done. I always try my best, and I always try and share whatever it is I can with other people who are restoring bikes. But when I think about it sometime, and it's common knowledge, I'm not the only person that restores motorcycles. And I'm going to say this, if I were to shell out my hard-earned money, there's a short list of people that I would give it to restore a bike for me. One of the first ones that comes to mind is Bill Mascio. Bill Mascio is from Santa Barbara. He's a very successful real estate agent, but he also does a phenomenal job at restoring a variety of vintage motocross bikes. I've seen him do everything from an AJS to a Zundap. Here's a spectacular Bultaco he recently completed, and if I were going to pay someone to restore a motorcycle for me, Bill Mascio would be one of the guys that I would choose. Somebody else I have a lot of respect for who does a great job, this man right here, Don Miller from Metro Racing. I've known Don a long time from the old days in Pennsylvania and New York. Don's like a Renaissance guy. He's not only a motocross restorer, he also restores hot rods, he has trucks, he's a phenomenal photographer, and he's also an excellent, excellent custom painter. Again, if I were to pay some money to somebody to restore a bike for me, Don Miller would be on my short list. Next guy up, this man right here, Keith Linus. I have a lot of respect for Keith. He's not only a great restoration guy, he makes bikes run like a scalded dog. I've seen him put some Osas underneath Scott Burnworth, and Scott has done some phenomenal things on those bikes. I have a lot of respect for Keith. He's great with the Osas, and he would be on my short list as well. The next guy, a Jersey brother, Anthony DeSantis. Anthony runs a very, very successful equipment company. They supply equipment to landscapers, big companies like that. As a hobby, Anthony has a phenomenal collection of Kawasaki's, and he does such a great job with them. And I've said this to Anthony before. Sometimes when I'm restoring a Kawasaki, I'll go on his page to get inspiration. That's what a great job he does. Now, I think I could keep up with him lap for lap on the motocross bikes, but he's got some street bikes and dual-purpose bikes that are absolutely phenomenal. So, with all things considered, and you people giving me some nice things and compliments on the bikes that I do, there are some other great guys out there who do a wonderful job as well, and I wanted to recognize them tonight. In the next segment, why not try this? One of the things that you want to keep around your shop is JB Weld. You can ask 10 people 10 different things about what you can use to repair metal or do certain things. You might get 10 different answers. JB Weld, very easy to use, economical, and I always get great results with it. What I generally use it on are nicks and scrapes on magnesium covers, aluminum covers. It's very, very handy to have when you have pitting on magnesium backing plates for your brakes and things like that. As you can see right here, we made a repair. It's now in prime. The cover came out beautifully, and with paint on it, well, pictures speak 1,000 words, as they say. JB Weld is just a great little product. I'm going to jump behind the counter right now. Jordan's going to get a little closer with the camera, and I'm going to do a little do-it-yourself segment showing you how you can use JB Weld on your next little repair. Jordan, you coming around?
Oh, yeah.
All right, looks good. To begin with, I just wanted to show you this cover. Yesterday, it had a hole in the top of it. It was rotted clear through. So what I did was I mixed up a little JB Weld, and as you could see, it actually comes through where the hole was. If you have to make a repair like this, and there's a hole in that cover, you want to make sure you get the JB Weld right through that hole and let it get in the other side. Much like anything else that you use when it comes to paint or things like that, the important thing is to make sure that your part is free of any grease, dirt, or oil. You want to get that all clean in there. You can use brake clean, carburetor cleaner, anything like that that'll get all the grease and dirt out of there. Let it build up in there. Don't try and force it out. When you get to this side, you're going to do the same thing. I like to spread it out with a razor a little bit. And it's going to look like that. It dries, it begins to harden in like 4 or 5 minutes. It gets really hard in about 4 hours. If you can, I would suggest you let it set overnight before you start to sand it. Now I'm going to mix up a little right here. And what you do is, or what I do is, you can mix it up on cardboard or a piece of plastic, whatever you want to use. But I just mix it up right here on this aluminum top. I clean off a little section like that. And I open up the first tube. And you put the even amount of both the white and the black together, just like that. And what I like to use, as I said earlier, is a razor like this. And I mix it up in both equal parts so it turns like a dark gray, almost black. Once it gets to that consistency, here we've got a deep gouge down the center of this cover, which this cover happens to be from a 1974 Yamaha MX. So you want to spread it nice and evenly and feather it out a little bit on the edges and make it as smooth as you can, because you're going to have to sand it, and it sands quite easily. So that would be ready to probably sand in about 4 or 5 hours. But my suggestion would be to wait until tomorrow. You know, wait till it dries overnight. So when you go to sand it, it sands pretty easily. Now I'm not going to take too much time doing this here, but I just want to give you an idea of how easy it is to work with. And when you're done, if you see that you may have a little low spot or a little something going on there yet, you can go over it again, apply a little bit more, you can sand it again, and you've got yourself a fairly good repair. Now, I'm going to come back down and I'm going to say a couple of more things about JB Weld that you can keep in mind when you're working with it. As I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure your part is free of any grease, dirt, or oil. One thing that came to mind today, and this was quite a few years ago, I had a Can-Am, and it was a Friday before a race, which was on Saturday, and I did something, I had a leaky clutch cover, something was going on. I took the clutch cover off, and when I put the kickstarter back on, I put it a spline too far. When I kicked that bike that afternoon before going to the race the next day, kickstarter bounced up, the bolt that sticks out of the top banged right into the case and put a hole in it. I took it apart, took some JB Weld, put it in there, just the way I showed you how to do it right now. It was hard as a rock the next day. I raced that bike, I never touched it, it never leaked. That's how good that stuff really, really is. It's not really for a restoration, although you could get by with it in certain areas where you have mild pitting. But that's my suggestion on JB Weld, how I've used it, how you can use it, and it's just an all-around great product. And I hope you get an idea of what you can do with JB Weld. Next up, the Moto Showcase. We've got a 1975 Kawasaki KX400. We restored this bike a few years ago for Jeff Schwartz from the Schwartz Motocross Museum. He's out in Illinois. This is the way the bike was sent to us from Jeff, and we went through it top to bottom the way we normally do. The bike came out spectacular in the end. The plastic, of course, from my dear friend Mark Hildebrand at Nightmare Racing. Much of the hardware was retained on this bike. A lot of it was polished. Well, it all was polished, and it was retained in the bike. I think we even retained the spokes in this case. Here you can see the bike when it was finished. Some details of how we do inside the brake drums and how we just give it an overall great look. Has a fine appearance to it. It turned out really, really well. Something I wanted to mention in this instance, and I'm not going to get into exact numbers of what Jeff paid or what I charged, But many times you'll hear people say, I don't want to restore a bike, or it's never going to be worth more than what I have invested into it. This bike was sold a few months after I completed the restoration for 30% more than what the restoration cost. Do the right job on the right bike. You'll at least break even every time. And if you do a quality job, you should be able to make a little bit of a profit too. I want to thank Jeff Schwartz again for giving me the opportunity to restore that bike for him. We were very, very proud of it. It turned out to be a spectacular piece. Here's the problem. This is the section of the show where you send me your questions throughout the week, and I do my best to come up with a solution for them. We've got some good ones this week. Sal Scarpa, is there a good way to remove dents from an expansion chamber? What about drilling a hole opposite the dent and pushing it out? Well, Sal, you can do that. But if you have a dent on one side of an expansion chamber, if you go on the other side, or if you have some serious damage like you have here, you really may not be able to do that. Also, when you go to drill in one side, you're going to have to get some type of tool in there that's big enough to push the other side out. It may take some skills in metal work that you may not necessarily have. So I want to show you something. I bought this years ago, and it works really well. And what it is, it's a male air fitting on this side. It's got a gauge. You can see what's going on here and how it mounts onto the pipe. There's a block of rubber between it that seals the pipe, won't let the air escape, and you've got a little bit of a smaller one on this side. And what you can do is hook it up to your compressor, and you only want to put about 4 or 5 pounds of air inside that pipe. I repaired a small dent on this pipe today. I wanted to do it live for you tonight, but because there was oil in the pipe and other stuff, the shop just filled up with smoke, so I couldn't really do it. But we repaired a section of this pipe down here. You're probably not going to be able to see it on camera, but it works really well. And I did it with nothing more than MAP gas, which you can buy right at your hardware store. So you can get little dents out. Big dents, I don't know. But I know some of the smaller ones you can get out. You can get bigger dents out too if they're shallow. A couple of things I want to remind you of if you should decide to buy one of these tools, which I bought on eBay some time ago. If you decide to do that, it's important to know, or it's important to be aware, that your pipe doesn't have any leaks in it. Because if it has leaks in it and it's cracked somewhere else, you're not going to be able to hold the air in the pipe. It's really not going to work so well for you. So Sal, I hope that gives you an idea of how to repair a pipe. Yes, you can do it that way. In fact, some time ago, Jay Hall sent in some pictures of a pipe he repaired. And what Jay did was, he actually ground off the factory wells, split the pipe in half, and hammered it all out. It's a very involved process. Jay's a very talented mechanic and a fabricator. He can weld, he can do a lot of things. But Sal, I hope that answered your question on the pipe. And we'll move on to our next question.
Sal just said that the monitor needs to be, he said, can't see the monitor too good, turn the camera to the right about 12 inches.
Turn the camera to the right?
It's his end. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, sorry, Sal.
All right. Can you tell us more about those bike lifts you use in your shop? In a lot of the pictures of the bikes that I restore, we have an item called a Moto Lift. They're available from a good friend of mine in Pennsylvania. His name is Rod Miller. I spoke to Rod today. He doesn't have a website any longer. He doesn't really have a presence on Facebook, but he will take your phone call, and there's his number right there. He's got about 40 or 50 of these things in his warehouse, he said. And I'm going to just give you a little brief look at what a Moto Lift is actually about. They weigh about, I'd say about 60 pounds. And they're really good when you have a long-term project and you want to mount it up there. I really like the way the clamps are made in this thing. They're made of aluminum. The plate is made of aluminum. Also, if you look at the bottom, the best way to use these things is with a 4x4 sheet of plywood and have it bolted to it. So you have some stability and your bike's not going to tip over. In my shop, I really don't do it that way, but it would be advisable for you to bolt it to a nice sheet of plywood. Great thing about these things is you can lift your bike up real easy. Put whatever you're working on in front of you at eye height. You don't have to bend over. It's got a little lock on the side. And also, when the job is done, they go down, well, if the lock was off, they go down pretty easily, and you can get your bike off. So there it is. It's called a Moto Lift. There are some still available from Rod Miller out in Pennsylvania. I spoke to Rod today. He's looking forward to hearing from you guys if you're looking to buy a Moto Lift. Our next question comes from, oh, there's a Moto Lift on a YZ250 we restored a while ago. From Frank Hunter, what bolts do you use when you restore a bike? Stock or something like stainless steel? Love your show. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for watching. I try to use as much original hardware as possible when I restore a bike. Even if I can't find, let's say, a used bolt. It could be an axle. It could be something. If I even go to a dealer sometime and buy something NOS, new old stock, sometimes from sitting on a shelf after 40 years, it's not going to match everything else that I've polished and replated. So I'll even polish a brand new bolt so it matches everything else. As far as stainless steel or any kind of aftermarket bolt, not on a restoration. On a race bike, I would actually advise it. Okay, it'll hold up better probably, especially if it's stainless steel. But on a restoration, we use as much original stuff as possible. We polish it to a very high luster. Then we have it clear zinced. As you can see, and it's especially important on certain bikes. Well, most bikes have some kind of marking. Bultaco, Honda, Kawasaki has numbers, Yamaha has numbers, and you want to be able to see that detail in a bike when you restore it. So there's no aftermarket stuff on our restorations on race bikes. It's fine. Thanks for the question. Joe, I have 3 bosses broken off of my RM370 engine case. Is there a way to repair them without taking the engine out of the bike? I have a donor engine, Tim McGuire. Tim, I don't think there's a real easy way to do it. When Tim is talking about the bosses, they're pegs, in other words, that come out from the engine. In this case, there would be 3 of them. Phillips screws would go in there. There would be a cover for that countershaft sprocket. But there really isn't a way that I think would be durable. I mean, you could maybe have it welded, but how's a welder going to get all around that small area, even with the sprocket off, even with the carburetor off? I don't think it's going to be a really good repair. Your bike, being the bosses are broken off on this side, while it may be a little work, you say you have a donor engine. Take the cylinder off, take the ignition cover and the ignition off, loosen up the dozen or so screws that are around it, pop the half a case off. Replace it with the one that has the bosses on it. You can paint it before you put it on, put it back together. Be a good time while you're in there. Check your main bearings, maybe put a crank seal in and a seal around your countershaft sprocket or your countershaft. It's the best way to do it, really. You're not going to get a good repair trying to weld something in that tight of a space. I appreciate the question, Tim. I hope I've given you some good advice. You know, the long way is many times the short way and the best way. What's it worth? This week I saw a 73 CZ sell on eBay. It sold for $5,500, a 73. It's a black frame bike. It appeared to be mostly original. It did have a positive feedback, and it was sold by our friend Ken Kaplan up at the Rockville Motorcycle Museum in Connecticut. Ken puts out a lot of good products up there. There's a great picture of it. I really thought at first that the bike was a little expensive at $5,500. But the more I started to look at it, it didn't appear that it was restored. It looked like it was a very well maintained racer. The seat looked original to me. The hubs do have some patina to them. They're obviously have not been fooled around with at all. Some of the things I liked about the bike were the tank. It had the nice aluminum strap that went down the top of the tank to hold it on. The fender appears correct. The rubber around the knee pads for the gas tank look really great. And I'm thinking that that pipe may even be original as well. The one thing I really liked about the bike as far as a racer goes was that it sported sun rims. Sun rims look really nice in this bike. They're probably a whole lot lighter and nicer than the original rims from CZ. And it just appeared to be an overall nice bike at $5,500. So it seemed a little expensive at first, but the more I looked at it, the more I looked at the details, and the more I read the description about how well the bike ran, I thought it was right in the ballpark. And there's a lot of bikes out there for $2,500 that are $2,500 away from being right. So I thought it was a fair deal for the seller and for the buyer. 73 CZ250. In the viewers and vendors segment tonight, I've got two for you. One is an old friend of mine, Dave Boydston. Great guy. Arizona Motorcycle Salvage. Dave is one of the major players in the game in every way imaginable when it comes to the sport of vintage motocross. He's a great vendor and supplier. He's got parts for just about everything. He's got barns full of bikes. And if there's something that you need, Dave's probably the guy that's going to have it. He's an accomplished racer, had a pro license back in the 70s. He's done a lot lately with CZs. He's sending some amazing bikes to the auction, to the Mecum auction every January for the past few years, and he's doing great with that. Here's a barn full of Dave's bikes. He's always got a supply of things going on. I believe this is an award. Thank you, Dave Boydston, for your commitment, vintage motocross racing. I could think of very few people that do more to promote the sport of vintage motocross than Dave Boydston. And I want to thank you, Dave, for being a friend, a good vendor, and a great guy supporting the sport of vintage motocross for all these years. Our next vendor, something new, TMC Company Vintage Bike Rental. The gentleman's name is Tom Contino, and he's in Southern California. What this man has done is put together a stable of bikes, and he rents them when you go to the track. You have to call him in advance. But he's got an amazing collection of really, really amazing motorcycles, and you could be like a factory rider in the 70s, just like you dreamed of. You call Tom, he rents you the bike, he has it there at the track. From what I understand, he even makes jerseys. He'll have a helmet for you. You'll be like a factory rider, just like you always dreamed of being. That's Tom Contino. This particular bike I'm showing you because it really caught my eye. It's a 74 250 Husqvarna Mag. Tom claims that this bike is modified. It's got some titanium on it. It's got a few lightened up parts. He says it weighs in at 186 pounds. I don't know what Tom charges to rent the bike for a day, but I'll tell you what. I'd pay that price to go ride that bike for a day down at Glen Helen or Pala or one of those other tracks. So, Tom Contino, TMC.co Rentals. He's on Facebook. He's got a great website, and he's got what you want. And before you go out and spend a bunch of money on a bike, give Tom a call, see if he's got one in his stable. Maybe he'll rent it to you for the day. You could race it, you can ride it. See if you like it before you go out and spend a bunch of loot on something you're not sure you're going to be happy with. Tom Contino, thank you for the content that you've given us, and I hope you get some action out of our announcement here tonight in the viewers and vendors segment. We're going to take a break here for a moment, then we're going to be back, and we'll have a couple of announcements for you.
La vie s'écrit en agfa. Make the most of the summer, hit the road running, Yamaha time's begun now. It's the only way to go, wherever you go, Yamaha makes it fun now. Yamaha is the better machine. There's never been a better time to buy the better street machine. Yamaha. Season. Here is the reason Yamaha sets you free now. Grab a mini and ride it, hit for excitement. Yamaha lets you be there. Yamaha is the better machine. There's never been a better time to buy the better Mini. Yamaha makes a mini machine that's better too. Up there in those mountains. Bigfoot.
Let's go. Our Suzukis can make it up there real easy.
Bigfoot? Forget your troubles, get on Suzuki. You're gonna chase all your cares away. Shout hallelujah, get on Suzuki. You're heading for a happy day. Forget your troubles, get on Suzuki.
Suzuki, designed to be the most trouble-free motorcycles in the world.
All right, those are great little commercials that Jordan has put together for us. Give us a little break during the show. I understand that some people said they had a little bit of a problem seeing the monitor. It's the first time we've had a bigger monitor. Everybody asked for a bigger monitor last week, so we did that this week. A little bit of a technical problem. We'll address it and get it all straightened out. So next week is going to be something different. We're not going to be here in the shop next week. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But right now, I want to thank Tom Daw, Brian Taylor, Mark Hildebrand, Tony Crisecco, Bob Messer, Ray Bennett. There's a whole bunch of guys, like 50 of you came in tonight to watch the show. I really appreciate your support. Kevin Askew, Mark Hector, Sal Scarpa, of course, who had a question for us earlier. I want to thank you guys all for sharing the videos that we do every week, coming in and watching the show. Now, in our announcement section tonight, Jordan, if you would advance this for us, unfortunately and sadly, we lost a pioneer, an American pioneer to motocross last week, Bobby Grossi. Bobby Grossi was a Northern California guy, got his start along with Brad Lackey here in Northern California. I've had conversations with Brad about Bobby, and Brad said when they first got started that Bobby was very fast, that Brad even had a little bit of a problem keeping up with him. Bobby was a very successful racer throughout the national circuit. He had ridden for Husqvarna for a lot of years. Here he is with Gary Vmxq&A, and he campaigned even a 125 Husqvarna for a little while. He always finished well at the Nationals. I think his best finish was in Daytona in 1973, where he finished first. Sadly, we lost Bobby this week. Our condolences to the Grossi family, to Billy and the Grossi family. On a happier note, coming up next Wednesday, we will be live on location with Brad Lackey in an undisclosed location. But we will be there live with Brad for about an hour. I encourage you all to inbox me your questions for Brad as soon as you can. We want to review them. I want to get them to Brad ahead of time so he can think about them a little bit, and we can get you some great comments and feedback from Brad. That's next Wednesday, November 6th at 6 o'clock. We will be live with 1982 500cc World Champion, Bad Brad Lackey. That wraps up our show for this evening. I want to thank everyone for being here at Vintage Motocross Q&A. Again, we'll be live on location with Brad Lackey next week. I look forward to your comments, and again, thank you for your support. Have a good evening.